Rome did not conquer the world with courage alone. In 218 BC, Hannibal crossed the Alps with war elephants and seasoned troops, expecting Roman lines to break like every army before them. They did not break. Legion after legion marched forward, absorbing losses that would have shattered any other nation. Historians have spent centuries asking the same question. How did Rome keep replacing entire armies and still win? The answer was not strategy. It was not even discipline. Something else stood behind every Roman soldier, something so common that no chronicler thought to name it as the true weapon. By 300 BC, Rome was still a regional power, surrounded by stronger enemies. The Samnites controlled the mountains. The Etruscans controlled trade. The Greeks controlled the south. Rome had no natural advantage in geography, population, or wealth. Yet within 200 years, Roman armies stood in Spain, North Africa, Greece, and Asia Minor. Generals across the ancient world tried to explain it. Some blamed Roman stubbornness. Others blamed sheer numbers. Neither explanation held up under scrutiny, because Carthage had more ships, and Macedon had better-trained phalanxes, and both eventually fell. The mystery deepened at Cannae in 216 BC. Hannibal encircled nearly 70,000 Roman soldiers and destroyed almost the entire force in a single afternoon. It remains one of the worst military defeats in history. Any other state would have surrendered. Rome did not. Within weeks, new legions were forming again. New soldiers, hastily trained, walked onto the field, carrying the same equipment their fallen fathers had carried. Where did this endless capacity come from? Scholars pointed to Roman law, to citizenship, to the Senate's stubborn will. All of that mattered, but none of it explained how a mid-sized Italian city kept arming tens of thousands of men, generation after generation, without running out of the one resource that decided every battle before it began. That resource was not bronze, and it was not wood. For centuries, Mediterranean armies had relied on bronze weapons, and bronze required tin, a metal found in only a few scattered locations across the known world. Tin had to be imported from as far as modern-day Britain and Afghanistan. Whoever controlled the tin routes controlled who could arm an army at all. Rome had almost no tin. Logically, Rome should have been permanently weak, dependent on trade networks it did not command. Instead, Rome fielded larger and larger armies with each passing decade. The answer to this contradiction was sitting in the hills of Etruria, and later across the Italian peninsula, buried in ordinary rock that nobody considered valuable. That rock contained iron. Iron ore did not require rare trade routes. It did not require ships crossing dangerous seas. It could be dug from local hillsides by farmers, smelted in simple furnaces, and hammered into blades by village smiths who had no formal training beyond what their fathers taught them. While Carthage and the Hellenistic kingdoms competed for scarce tin deposits, Rome quietly built an economy around a metal that was almost everywhere. Iron was heavier to work, harder to smelt properly, and less forgiving of mistakes, but it was abundant. And abundance, not elegance, wins long wars. The Roman gladius, the short sword that became the signature weapon of the legions, was forged from iron, not bronze. Early versions were inconsistent, sometimes brittle, sometimes too soft. Roman smiths solved this through repetition, folding and hammering the metal to work out impurities, developing techniques that spread from workshop to workshop across the growing republic. By the time of the Punic Wars, Roman ironworking had reached a level of consistency that no bronze weapon could match. A broken bronze sword was a disaster in the field. A broken iron sword could often be reforged by a camp blacksmith within hours, using ore or scrap gathered nearby. This single difference, repairability at scale, meant Roman legions could sustain campaigns lasting years, far from home, without waiting on fragile supply chains. Iron did more than arm the sword arm. The pilum, the heavy throwing spear that softened enemy lines before the legions closed in, used an iron shank designed to bend on impact. This was not an accident. A bent iron shaft could not be pulled out of a shield or thrown back. disabling enemy equipment with a single throw. Bronze could never have achieved this effect, since bronze fractures rather than bends. Iron's unique property, its ability to deform without shattering, gave Roman infantry tactics an edge that bronze-armed enemies simply could not replicate. Segmented iron armor, the lorica segmentata, gave legionaries flexible yet strong protection that bronze breastplates of the same weight could not match. Iron horseshoes, iron nails, iron tools for building roads and siege engines all flowed from the same overlooked resource. Here is what made iron the true architect of empire. It was not glamorous. Nobody wrote poems about iron ore the way they wrote about gold or ivory. But because it was common, Rome could equip farmers turned soldiers on a scale no rival could sustain. When Hannibal destroyed one legion, iron equipped another within a season. When wars dragged into their second and third decade, iron mines kept producing, while tin routes to rival powers became targets and choke points. The material itself was Rome's real strategic reserve, hidden inside every battle fought under its name. Once this becomes visible, the entire arc of Roman expansion reorganizes itself around iron. The conquest of northern Italy secured richer iron deposits in the Alps. The province of Noricum, later prized above almost any other Roman territory, produced iron so reliable that Roman steel from that region became famous across the empire for holding an edge no other metal could match. Roman engineers used iron tools to carve roads through mountains, connecting conquered territory faster than any previous civilization had managed. Iron nails held together the wooden hulls of the fleets that finally broke Carthaginian naval dominance. Even Roman concrete construction relied on iron tools for quarrying the stone that built aqueducts, colosseums, and fortresses stretching from Britain to Syria. Medicine, too, quietly depended on iron. Roman surgical instruments, forged from iron and later steel, allowed for procedures unavailable to earlier civilizations, limited by softer bronze blades. Military medics could perform faster, cleaner amputations and treatments on campaign, keeping wounded soldiers alive and eventually returning many to service. An empire's ability to sustain 30 legions across 3 continents depended not just on tactics, but on this quiet, technical advantage repeated in thousands of small ways across the ancient world. Trade routes shifted to follow iron. Entire towns rose around iron forges, in Gaul, in Hispania, and in the Balkans, feeding raw material toward the legions stationed on distant frontiers. When barbarian tribes beyond the Rhine and Danube began forging iron weapons of their own, historians mark this as the beginning of a slow shift in the balance of power, centuries before Rome's eventual decline. The empire that had built itself on a resource once thought too common to matter eventually faced rivals who had learned the same lesson. Return now to that battlefield in 216 BC, to the soldiers standing in formation after Cannae, weapons drawn from the same forges that had armed their fathers and would arm their sons. The mystery was never really about courage or law or the will of the Senate alone. It was about a metal buried in ordinary hillsides across Italy, transformed by fire and hammer into something that could be replaced faster than it could be destroyed. Every gladius, every nail in every road, every tool that raised an aqueduct traces back to the same unglamorous rock. Look around your own home today. The steel in your door hinges, the iron in your kitchen pan, the rebar inside the walls holding up the building around you. All of it descends from the same discovery that quietly built an empire 2,000 years ago. Rome did not conquer the world with bronze or gold or even genius alone. It conquered the world with iron, the material too ordinary for anyone to notice, until it was already holding up civilization itself.